themselves up coming into this match, but we'll talk a bit about like the opponents that they played during the Swiss format, what we can kind of expect from both these players and everything after we introduce the players.
Top left-hand side, our red Zerg from the Shopify Rebellion. This is Lambo.
And down here in the bottom right-hand side of the map, the blue Protoss player, also from Shopify Rebellion, he is Harstem. But yeah, to quickly talk about, I guess, Harstem's run, since we're already on his camera and everything. He had a pretty interesting run, and he did end up beating, I believe, Wayne, and Wayne was on a pretty sick run at the time, having beaten, you know, Showtime and stuff in ZVP already at that point. So I think Harstem was playing overall pretty well, but he did end up losing to a Laser 0-2, and I feel like Harstem has been on this kind of like hot and cold mode lately, where sometimes I watch Harstem play a best of 3 or best of 5, and I'm like, oh my god, this is the Harstem I always wanted. This is like the Harstem that makes us believe in year or decade or century of Harstem. And then sometimes kind of like, oh man, that's a little bit rough to watch. You know, Harstem kind of just like very quickly dips out of an event or something. I feel like Lambo's been a little bit of that as well, like the past few months. But lately, the most recent match he played in this event, Wardy, was against MaxPax, and he beat MaxPax 2-1. That is not something many people get to say they've been able to do, is beating MaxPax, who is in contention for best Protoss player in the world right now.
Yes, no, MaxPax's been really good lately, and I think that's my concern coming into this series. Lambo, he plays at his very best when he has preparation time, which is today. He's playing against someone he has a lot of videos to study from, Harstem, right? And also just, you know, performance recently, Lambo has pulled it out against players like MaxPax, whereas Harstem had a shaky series versus Wayne. Like, his series versus Wayne maybe should have been very convincing, but it wasn't. It was a lot shakier than I felt it should have been, and then he lost to a Laser. To me, that kind of trifecta thing says that we're going to see, you know, we should see a very Lambo-dominated series, like, you know, Lambo should be kind of the favorite coming into this. I wouldn't necessarily say that overall. If you're telling me Lambo versus Harstem, like, oh yeah, actually I think this could be a good one. I feel like looking at the details, it almost unexcites me about the match, so I'm not going to look at them too much. I'm just going to let the games hopefully do the talk. And we are going to open Stargate. Harstem, a big, especially on a map like Dragon Scales, usually is a big kind of, you know, player who likes to go into the Twilight Council and go into some Glaives and then Disruptors on the follow-up. So Stargate for him on this map would not have been what I'm expecting. And maybe if you're trying to, you know, mind game your way around Lambo, stuff like this is the kind of thing you have to do, stepping out of your normal comfort zones.
Yeah, especially when you consider that these two are teammates. They definitely talk a lot with each other about strategy and all that stuff. I think that this is gonna not necessarily be the worst idea. Just try and do little mix-ups and things like that. Try and be a little bit harder to predict. And I think this is something I also always enjoy about Harstem, is that I feel like he is very thoughtful about a lot of the things that he does. And not only that, I feel like he also usually takes whatever is normal and just finds little ways to add his own twist to them, add a bit of his own personality to them. So it does, in some ways, make him a little bit harder to prepare for, because it's not just preparing against, yeah, this is like the standard Stargate style or something. It's like the way that he uses his units, maybe the way that he decides to position them, the timing of exactly when he decides to get aggressive. All those little things can sometimes have minor deviations for Harstem.
Lambo moves that Overlord in. Obviously, as high ground vision provided by the Oracles, you may as well go deep and see what you can spot. Obviously, you're fairly aware at this point of what is going on because you've seen the Oracles, so everything kind of revealed. First Oracle goes across the map, and Lambo just continues to set up. He played pretty macro-focused against MaxPax, if I remember correctly. It was very much so a case of just kind of game going on, and then some very scrappy kind of Roach Ravager Bane versus the typical kind of Stalkers and Blink and stuff, so you know, could be, you know, very much so what this game is currently headed to. Oh, Fleet Beacon. That's absolutely not what this game is headed to then. Fleet Beacon, and I assume very soon a second Stargate. Otherwise, I have no idea what we're doing if we're trying to one Stargate.
One Stargate Fleet Beacon carrier, Wardy. Let's go. No.
What if it's straight up just a mothership rush? Like, can you imagine?
It's just dude, that I feel like that would be one of those moments where we have to ask Harstem afterwards, like, where did you get this plan? He's like, well, I read this really great Reddit comment in the Protoss suggestion balance thread or something. You're like, oh my god, this is so Harstem. But yeah, there's gonna be that second Stargate. And Wardy, what do we usually expect when you go for the second Stargate in the Fleet Beacon this early on?
2 carriers, I think, nowadays really is the most common go-to. Yeah, we start with carrier. There was a while where like Tempest were the go-to. We used to call that the max pack / parting build, I believe. But generally just 2 carriers, and they kind of like, my favorite kind of way to kind of compare this is like to BCs and TVZ, where it's like the BC rush is designed to just kind of get a couple units out. They're very chunky, they're very kind of tanky. They can harass, but you can always teleport them home to safety. And the carriers kind of fill a similar role where you can always recall them home to safety after harassing a bit. Then you kind of generally, you don't keep building Sky Toss with this. You typically go back into a ground army, and then you use those carriers as just a good core of your army. Keeps you very safe against certain attacks and can help you get into the Sky Toss again later in the game because you've already made the initial step into a couple of carriers much earlier on. So yeah, if you get away with this, it's really great at setting the foundations for the rest of the game pretty much.
Yeah, well, those first 2 carriers are getting close to popping on out. I want to note that Lambo has not seen a lot so far. He's actually still making a lot of these roaches and stuff. And I think going back to what you were saying, because the core part of this army still goes back into a ground force and everything, it's not like Lambo's wasting his time making roaches, but he needs to make sure he has those queens in the right spot to deal with the carriers and everything. He's going to have 10 queens out on the map soon as he is going to spot out those carriers, but he really does need to make sure he is in the right position with all of his units, because otherwise this kind of little push out can really escalate quite quickly.
The Void Rays are not something I had on my radar here. That was not something I was kind of expecting to see, so that one is a little different. Just because it usually is the carriers, like I say, into the ground force, sometimes 4 carriers, but this time will be a few Void Rays too. That is good against the Corruptor answer to this, because you get Corruptors out, they're good against carriers. But then the Void Rays are good against Corruptors, right? And it will also help you out a lot against kind of more aggressive attacks if Lambo ended up coming across the map. Also, I'm going to take a forward base as well. He actually did this against Wayne on this map. He is a big fan of this forward base. So that's definitely something he's trying to, you know, utilize, that he's clearly comfortable with, even across different styles. Believes he can obviously then push forward a lot on the map from this position, I imagine. That's going to be important for him, as Sealer Knight is coming down from Lambo. He knows he's got a time in here to try and kill this, it would seem.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how immobile this army is going to be. I actually love that decision from Lambo. And, well, a lot of the reason I can see why Harstem might like that forward base is because it's so close to him attacking anyways. He has the immobility. Lambo's picked actually the perfect answer to try and exploit exactly that, though.
Intrigued to where the Nidus goes down. Just bottom left corner, he just wants to get close to a base. This isn't about kind of being sneaky, diving a main. This is just creating a fight where his queens can join in easily with creep spread. So he's got a lot of queens. They're going to be a core component against the carriers, and in this case as well, the Void Rays. And that's what we're setting up for. Harstem sees Lambo moving down the left side. As the Nidus pops, creep teamers will be a priority. Get those in position. Get that creep pushing forward. A second Nidus to get further forward more easily. And can we bait that first disruptor shot is going to become a question here, because if you can get that disruptor shot wasted like this, that works out kind of okay. We might kill this Nidus, and that's fine, but there's still creep spread coming anyways. I mean, you buy a little bit of time with that, but not too much. I mean, these queens are still here fighting the interceptors off, and this base is not looking easy to hold on to for your dragon.
No, most certainly is not. I believe that shield battery overcharge is still available, and there's a shield battery, a pretty safe spot inside that mineral line, but Harstem is giving up so much ground. Once the gateways start getting knocked down, it's going to be very difficult for Harstem to keep his probes alive and mining into that tucked away location. Harstem just has to give up the location at this point. He's not even really going to be able to have a safe way to evacuate the probes out either. It looks like he's getting some counter damage done on the other side of the map during all of this, but Harstem's army just doesn't look that large. He's really struggling to get up the army supply he needs to actually deal with this.
22 probes is obviously going to suck as well. Lambo needed to do some amount of damage here, but look at the tech behind it. Infestation Pit, Spire. He is getting himself answers for further down the lines. We are going to get a double disruptor shot onto a couple of queens, and we are working our way through that queen number, but it feels like the amount of air units here is not that scary anymore, because we also don't have many interceptors left. A couple of Void Rays definitely are perhaps the big factor at the tail end of this. So we still obviously have these queens kind of standing strong. That's another nice little jump onto the queens with that attack, with that disruptor shot. We have new queens showing up, though. That's the kind of point we're at, and Harstem is obviously still losing his forward base.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of play over here for Lambo, is just try and buy as much time as he can with the queens, while the roaches and ravagers knock out the defenses over that fourth base, and hopefully eventually reinforcements or even just the rest of the roaches can eventually dive in on this fourth. If they get a kill on that fourth, Harstem is a 2-base Protoss player. Doesn't matter if he has carriers, and Void Rays and Disruptors and everything, he just will not have an economy to replenish the gateway, the ground base army that's supposed to cover against all those units. As Lambo's getting, as you were saying before, behind this into Spire Tech, into Lurkers, into Hive.
Yeah, again, all of that set up here. There was a moment earlier where I felt as though Harstem maybe... well, actually, there was like a Spire on the way from Lambo, and then he cancelled it for the Nidus, but maybe now I'm just kind of thinking I was talking about a Spire. Either way, right, this is extremely successful. And yes, Lambo's on a lower work account, but he's knocked Harstem down to initially 2 bases. Harstem re-expands to 3. Harstem is still down on workers. And the only good thing is that Harstem obviously does have a decent army, right? It is still carriers and Void Rays. They're good tech units. There's still a good amount of Disruptors up. And as we build Hydra Lurker, I feel like we're not quite there. That's why the Hive is important and why Lambo won't do anything before it, because I'm pretty sure he needs Vipers to be able to fight this. He needs to abduct in the carriers. Otherwise, he just is not going to have a good time in this fight with Hydras. So, yeah, that feels like an absolute essential part of this for him. He clearly seems to know that he's not attacking before those Vipers. He goes straight into them once the Hive finishes. I do think they're essential, but Harstem's making use of this time to get more carriers out, and that's where his army might actually become okay. That's why I kind of wish I saw the Spire kind of coming through. He was building a... I guess he was building Hydrogen Infestation Pit. For some reason, I was so convinced there's been a Spire on the way at some point, but...
So you're absolutely right, Wardy, because I saw it in production twice. Cool. It was once, like, way earlier on.
Yeah.
And then he canceled it, and then he tried to make a second one, I think, and also canceled that one.
Yeah, I think he went, like, pre-Nidus he was setting up a Spire, and now, like, on the follow-up he was setting up a Spire, but he's decided just to fully commit to Hydra Lurker. Which is fine.
Yeah.
Just obviously, I do think that in general, the later this game goes, the more corrupt as you want. Third time's the charm. This time, I'm taking a screenshot and making sure I remember that there's definitely a Spire on the way.
I love the idea that it's like one of those micro task simulator things where it's like every so often you just have to like remember to build and cancel a Spire. Make sure that a Spire is constantly building at every point in the game. Disruptor does try and zone out the army, but eventually does get picked off thanks to the Vipers that are now here. But that choke point, still not fun to try and go through. So ends up eating the big Disruptor shot over there. Lambo, I think he's still going to have some trouble breaking on through over here once the rest of the army arrives. Lambo still needs his whole army together to try and bust this location.
Good split against the Disruptor. The Vipers are having trouble getting into range against the Disruptors because of what was initially the High Templar. As we get the Abduct off here, I just don't think there's enough anti-air. The Parasitic Bomb's doing most of the work. The few Hydras in the back, I mean, there's just not a lot. They are getting through the Void Rays, but there is going to be a carrier count left over. The Roach is just going to have to base race out this, I say base race, but just kind of race to kill this base, as they will look as though they get it. I mean, extra Hydra showing up looking good, because if we can just knock down these Interceptors, the carriers are no longer an issue. We will get rid of the Void Ray. I think anything you get rid of in the sky right now is just going to help in the future, and I just feel as though Lambo is just about going to be doing enough here to knock this game down.
Yeah, I was a little skeptical about the attack in against that kind of army that Harstem had, but it ends up working out because Harstem just cannot replenish those units. GG gets called. Lambo takes the first game, and what an interesting start to the series, Wardy. I've got to say, I've been enjoying this so far.
Yeah, definitely interesting, right? A little bit different, a very different approach, obviously, and yeah, just Harstem coming up with something, and Lambo really seeming like he had a good idea of what to do. I actually really feel that Harstem is not far from actually making this a very playable game. Like, he is a couple carriers away, maybe even, from actually, like, winning this fight. Like, there was so few Hydras left over. If you can defend that base, even if you lose that base and you just get up to a Hydra count, and then your opponent didn't make Corruptors this entire time, and your army is just unkillable. Like, there is a stage where that happens. Your army just is unkillable, and the carriers just move across the map, and they have an absolute field day of it. So, it feels like we were so close to that. Obviously, Harstem didn't quite get it. We are going to head into Game 2 with Lambo up 1 in this best-of-5 series. And, yeah, I mean, how many times will we cancel a Spire this series? That's going to be a fun question, I guess. Because that was, really had me kind of baffled. I was like, I'm sure there was one. I was like, okay, cancel it for the night. But, like, there was another one. I mentioned what he was doing. Yeah, this man just doesn't like to commit to things, apparently.
Yeah, I need to like check out on the stream on delay and everything to make sure that he actually finishes that Spire, that he didn't just end up losing or canceling the Spire, or like the game didn't end right before the Spire completed or something. Because yeah, that was a little bit silly. But I am very interested to see how Harstem plays things out in game number 2, because that does feel to me like the kind of build that you bust out in a game, maybe like a return game at the end of a best of 5. It's not really something you do twice in a row, right? Like, I guess I can kind of see it, but it feels less likely, right?
100%. I think that's the kind of build you bust out once, maybe a second time if you really felt like it put you in a good position, or if you feel like maybe in this case, Harstem's like, well, if I just did this, it would have been fine for me. But yeah, it's not a go-to every kind of game thing, because then Lambo can just hard counter it. So I think we've seen it. I don't think we'll see it again. As in the bottom right, Blue Protoss from the Shopify Rebellion is Harstem.
And up at the top left-hand side, setting up 1-0, he is also from the Shopify Rebellion. It's Lambo, who I did confirm on the stream finished that Spire.
Nice.
Spire was completed.
He built one. Let's go.
Literally, I want to say I think the game ended about within 5 to 10 seconds of the Spire completing. So clearly, if Lambo just builds a Spire, he wins the game. That was the key thing he was missing for that game before.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, like I said, the Spire is a great choice. The Corruptors are really good against the carriers. In this case, when actually the Void Rays started coming up, maybe the Hydra Den just became the better call.
Yeah.
And especially if you can overwhelm with Hydras, which you probably felt like you could because he did so much damage initially. He just never actually got, like, that many Hydras at first, right? Like, there was never really, like, a huge amount of them, so it's not like you morphed them all into Lurkers, because we had a Lurker Den, we never even saw Lurkers hit the field, right? So, yeah, it was kind of a funky little situation, but I think in the end, overall, Lambo was making the right calls. It just got a little hairier than he wanted it to.
Yeah, and I can kind of even justify the Lurker decision in my head a bit, because a lot of the time, you were talking about this actually before, the follow-up there for Harstem or like the Protoss player is not to add on additional Void Rays to get up more disruptors and everything, and to lose your third and fourth base so that not being able to actually replenish a ton of your gateway units. A lot of the time, the answer or the kind of follow-up there for the Protoss player is flooding out a lot of zealots and having a big ground army. So I actually don't mind the decision to go for the Lurkers and to have that kind of setup ready. And then maybe I think as he was getting that setup there, what ended up happening is he ends up killing like so many of the bases of Harstem, and Harstem doesn't have the economy to fund out flooding out zealots and has to make the transition to saying, I'm doubling down on Sky Toss and getting up more carriers and things like that, or disruptors. So if it's from that perspective, if that's kind of like how things played out, I actually don't mind that decision making that much. And it's a lot easier for me to say that also because, you know what, Wardy, at the end of the day, he won the game. So
yeah. No, I think there's a lot of thought that goes into what you're building and why you're building it. And I think that's definitely one of those games where a lot of that got tested, as we are going to see the Stalker popping out here early. Overlord, of course, can still get high ground until the Stargate unit pops out. So Stalker will just pop and go for the Zovi. And that Ovi is going to get pushed to the high ground there. So away we go. Blink speed building on the side of Lambo. Nothing surprising about this. Again, Stargate from Harstem, which, don't get me wrong, Stargate's not like a weird style. It's just I do expect, you know, going into this, I was really expecting to see a bit more of the kind of like the glaives into the disruptors and stuff that Harstem really showcased throughout the group stage and so on. The Stargates was something I'm not quite as prepped for him to be doing as much, but I mean, it's just normal. It's not like it's weird, so it's not strange that he cranks it out or decides to do it. So, gonna do the typical kind of whole thing of just killing this Overlord now, and Oracle number 2's on the way.
Yeah, and I think just to even back up what you were saying, I think that I like that decision against Lambo specifically because he's again a player that is very familiar with Harstem, their teammates, and I know that they do actually talk a little bit with each other and stuff. But even beyond that, you were talking about this before. Lambo's really good when he's a player who can kind of prepare for his opponents a bit, and he's a very thoughtful player. So Harstem just doing something a bit different than he was doing from a lot of the Swiss format stage of the matches. I actually really like that decision. He's kind of being mindful of who he's playing and what Lambo's strengths are.
Absolutely, I do like that part of it because I think I said to you in the kind of the break between games, I was like, I'm worried that Lambo is so good at prepping and with so much information on someone he knows so well. Like, this is the kind of series that can really flop hard for Harstem because Lambo's just so well set for it. So if you throw a lot of that preparation out the window by just playing Stargates, it's not that Lambo didn't prep anything against Stargate openers, but it might throw Lambo out of his comfort zone where he might have gone in thinking, oh yeah, I'm really quite sure what I'm going to do, into now more of a like, oh, what am I going to do? Like, did I have an exact plan against Stargate, or did I just have a generalized plan? So, yeah, something along those lines. Is just Blink, by the way, so nothing really weird there, just following up with Blink Store, because we see that day in and day out right now in PvZ. And, yeah, the couple Oracles just tag up a Revelation, not finding any damage, good defense from Lambo to keep himself very safe.
Yep. And very important when you're going for this blink style to make sure that you at least keep 2 of those oracles alive. And since Harstem only went for 2 oracles, he has been playing pretty safe with them. He's not doing the kind of dives that maybe he was thinking about doing in that first game quite as much to try and snag a couple extra drone kills. He knows having those oracles is what protects your stalkers against a lot of those lings. The stasis traps have an immense value and everything. And well, now he can start trying to target fire down a couple of these units, but Blink isn't quite done just yet, so he ends up having to dive these oracles in very, very far, nearly ends up losing one, ends up losing a stalker. All in all, not a great place for Harstem to be, but he didn't lose, or that didn't go as poorly as I thought it was about to.
Yeah, he could have lost like 2 or 3 stalkers, the oracle as well, and then it really would have been disastrous. He just about salvaged it into something that wasn't quite as painful to witness. Now we have our Overlord speed coming up. Roach speed as well. Overlord speed is always like a scary one, right? Because it's like, does Lambo think he can come across the map with some Dropper Lords, some Queens, and just kill him? Obviously, there is benefits to Overlord speed beyond just trying to be aggressive with a Dropper Lord as we get another Stalker and force a recall, by the way. Talk about just limiting map control. Yeah, this is going very well for Lambo. He puts so much damage on these Oracles as well. Yeah, I just wonder if there is going to be some aggression here from Lambo. I mean, he's on 70 drones. I don't imagine it's too aggressive. Just probably get that Overlord speed up, use it for some overseers. He is dominating on the map, though. My goodness, every time I look somewhere, it's like, oh, there's a Stalker dying, there's an Adept dying. Harstem just isn't getting much of a chance to do anything as he tries to work his way up to Storm. I mean, Lambo's just killed off a few units here and there and really given himself a bit of a clear path to the later game.
Yeah, I feel like it's a combination of the Queens being so aggressively far forward that the Oracles couldn't really cover. There's only the 2 Oracles that were there. And just also Harstem being so aggressive, so far out on the map. Oh, losing an Oracle. And it was before he had Blink that he was losing so many of these Stalkers and being so aggressive on the map. So the Lings just kept getting these surrounds. The Oracles would have to try and bail them out. And then the Queens were not that far behind because Harstem was so far out on the map trying to pick off Overlords and Creep Tumors and everything. So things have just not been going well. And I know that Roaches are inflated supply wardy, but with a Creep Overlord Highway and everything coming out over here and a 60 supply lead right now, it's actually almost 70 army supply lead for Lambo. I have to be a little bit afraid for Harstem.
You do? But he does have Storm. Okay, he's got 8 Stalkers and 3 Zealots. He doesn't even have Charge just yet. I was like, Storm's nice though, right? And I'm like, well, you kind of need a follow-up to Storm. Like, getting the units low HP doesn't matter if there's no units to give, like, the final blow. So, yeah, this is not looking pretty, man. Even with great Storms, I mean, the Storms might buy him some time for an extra warping or 2, but Lambo is on a mission across this map. You can see the High Templar. They're trying to get far enough forward to hit a good Storm on the Ravagers. He nearly loses one to Queens. That's really a battle of who does the least damage, as we do have a Storm coming down, hitting a few Ravagers, hitting a few Roaches. That's a lot of Storms for a small portion of the army, honestly.
Yeah, really, really unfortunate. It ends up double storming on some of those Roaches, but Robotics Facility depowered. There are units inside the Natural ravaging it, and Lambo takes the game. Not a chance there. Oh, man, really, really unfortunate. As Harstem, he was definitely playing a little bit of... I feel like making that transition into getting up all those High Templars and everything, it is a brutal period for Protoss players where you have maybe like a couple of the Storms out and everything, and you either are lacking the gateway units to really take a direct fight, or you just don't have as many High Templars out, and you barely have like a couple of Storms available, and you're really looking for that big power surge of getting up both the core army there to finish off the job and also having the Storms. But that was just especially brutal to watch there, Wardy.
I don't want to say it, but like, there's a second series where we're just not having the greatest of games right now. Little unfortunate, I think, from Harstem. Just like everything was just, I think it just came down to like, Lambo was just a little bit sharper on every little thing, right? Just catching the Oracle, was multiple times in position to get damage done to the Oracle. That was definitely helping. Just making Harstem uncomfortable, and that dive to Storm. The thing is, Storm is great if your opponent's playing like very Ling Bane Ravager heavy, right? But then if it's just Roach Ravager, like Storms are good at softening up Roaches, but there needs to be the follow-up. And there was an Immortal and a handful of Stalkers. Like, he just didn't have all the other pieces of the army that needed to be there. And because of that, he kind of just got swept when it came to this attack. And I think we are starting to see some of the preparation and some of the timings of Lambo coming out, realizing, just how solid he can be at certain points. We start off in the bottom right with our Red Zerk, who is up 2-0 and is speeding his way through this round of 16 matchup. It is, in the bottom right, Lambo.
And up here at the top left-hand side, our blue Protoss player who is down to his final lifeline in this series, in this tournament. It is our blue Protoss, Harstem. Ay, Wardy. That last game was definitely rough. I do think, I feel like I can point a little bit back to, I don't know if it solves all of the problems there. I don't know if this actually buys him enough time. But I think even from the beginning, Harstem really did lose a lot of early map control. He was losing units.
Yes.
He lost his oracles. He was losing his ability to both see the attack coming across the map, like the overlords making their journey around, so that he could throw down a ton more shield batteries or just focus on warping in more units, throwing up production, and even just losing some of those stalkers and stuff, that extra firepower that's supposed to be there to finish the job against the roaches and things that get stormed. I think that as much as that attack finished the game, it really did feel like Harstem was losing things from earlier on there.
Yeah, no, the two stalkers, the adepts, just everything. Like Lambo, really, that's what I mean. Lambo was so good, so sharp early game, and just sort of, it wasn't just shutting down damage, it was removing potential damage as well, right? Like, it wasn't like he killed the adepts after he's pulling the drones away and he's like, okay, I didn't lose any drones. It's like he found the adepts on the map, killed them, and then he didn't have to worry about the two adepts anymore. So all of this just has a knock-on effect. Lambo gets a great start. Harstem loses a few units. Harstem, decides to dive to Storm. Storm doesn't really go too well against the Roach Ravager. Like I say, I love Storm if there's just more support for it, but like we saw, the support did not exist in that scenario. And here we are, game number 3, Neo Humanity. And, well, I mean, now or never, Harstem. This is your season on the line as we head into Neo Humanity and see what we can do.
Yeah, Wardy, I feel like I'm always... This map always, whenever I look at Protoss wall-ins on this map, I feel like I'm always second guessing it. Harstem has 2 gaps in that wall, right? This is definitely one of the maps where you can get the 2 building wall off.
Yeah, the gateway needs to be
whether or not it's a good idea to do. Yeah.
So like the pylon's too far back, right? So if the pylon's further forward, the gateway comes a hex forward, and then the cyber core is actually up against the edge, I believe.
I think you're right on that. I think you're right.
So yeah, maybe a bit of a mistake there. Could be punished later. Twilight Council currently on the way. Harstem is mixing it up via Dragon. Gotta say that I'm kind of happy to see that, at least.
He definitely needs to change things up, because what he's been doing has not been working out so far, at least. Even if this is just kind of maybe the style that maybe Lambo would be more prepared for, it's also going to be the style that Harstem was actually doing quite well in the groups with. So I don't hate the idea of this. Robotic facility thrown down nice and early on. Going to push back that Overlord, and as much as I was talking about the little gap in the wall, it's not going to play any impact in this game, and I think very much so shouldn't be expecting that as well.
You know, it's one of those things, though, where it's still, like, this cyber core is so much more exposed than it usually would ever have to be, though. And maybe Lambo doesn't make use of that, but it's one of those things. Like, surface area is a factor, and against certain builds, this could be punished more heavily, versus just having that kind of, 2-building wall-off, right, if you didn't need the extra gate behind. So, yeah, just a little thing to note that's probably not going to pay absolutely no attention to or any need to kind of watch in this game. As we just head ourselves into Glaives, a Robo, 3 gates as well extra, so it's going to be 4 gates. And oh my god, Future Dragon, this is a crazy strategy. He's going to build the Warp Prison with the 4-gate Glaive attacks.
What an interesting idea to build the Warp Prism instead of the Observer. I wonder what he can accomplish with this Warp Prism. Yeah. It's definitely, this is going to be the much more typical kind of way to do the 4-gate Resonant Glaive Adept attacks, and we'll see how prepared Lambo's going to be for this, because, Lambo, he's been playing damn solid, and I'm not going to take anything away from him, but, it's not Serral necessarily, so there's definitely a lot of potential for something to get done here.
Absolutely, right? Adepts can, even if they're, you're prepared against them at first, it's a constant battle where you constantly have to be repositioning, reassessing the situation, figuring out where they're going to go to next. You've got to constantly be on top of things when it comes to these adepts, and as they threaten the first shade in, I was going to say, this is tempting to commit, but I think it's bad, because the queens are in range on the low ground, this roach is popping out, and all the adepts low ground die instantly. These adepts in the main do not seem that threatening now, so this is going to be a good shutdown for Harstem, who is now going to lose some drones toward the 3rd base. That is going to be, well, Harstem finds some damage. But yeah, Lambo is going to find himself a really good defense initially because he killed a lot of adepts already. Prism now hop into the main. Lambo's on top of it. Gotta say, Lambo is playing a very solid start.
Yeah, and this is the tough thing is when you're losing the Adept, it makes it even harder to get the damage on. Actually, really nice that Harstem was able to get a couple of drones over there because so far things have just not been going well. And it's worth mentioning that Lambo is really producing a lot of units to make this defense happen. It looks like he has barely lost very much because he did cut drone production very early on, and that does allow Harstem to have a bit of a worker lead. Right now it's like, you know, like 10-ish workers, but as more drones pop out, that worker gap is going to kind of get a bit smaller. The important thing is Harstem was doing that attack, and as soon as that did not really end up going very well, Harstem was already thinking about his transition points. He threw down his Robo Bay. He had his third base that he's been probing on up and everything. So it is now about making sure that his transitions get out fast enough.
Yeah, no, getting those up, getting into the disruptor drops. And these Adepts still on the map in the Prism, very important because that's the one thing that stopped Lambo going to the other side and just being like, hey, what if I just kill your third or just stop you getting a third base, right? And Lambo's had the unit count where absolutely that would have been an option for him. So yeah, it's very important that this Prism was keeping Lambo at least a little bit busy. That's one big benefit for Harstem because I really could see this being a game where Lambo was across the map and winning the game already. So yeah, that's big news. Obviously, the Prism goes back home now because it wants to pick up the Disruptors instead. So to get ready for that, the Adept's already out over here. They need to be careful. There's, you know, a good amount of units still from Lambo around.
Yeah. Have to make sure that they have those shades ready to start falling on back, but disruptors are going to be out now, and a couple of them going to help defend that third base location a lot more securely as the Prism does end up having to retreat back home. I think this is where I just start getting more and more worried as time goes on, though, because Lambo is just so gosh darn close now to Harstem's base. He took the forward fourth base location that a lot of Zerg players have been enjoying on this map. And once he knocks down, say, like one of the sets of rocks there, he has such fast access to just push across the map with his queens and being included.
That's where Harstem can really find some damage with these disruptors. There's almost unlimited potential with disruptor drops like this, right? Because if the Zerg messes up for just a second, if they make an incorrect dive, you can lose almost everything. So this is where, no matter how it's gone so far, it's absolutely game on for Harstem. He's going to get himself a couple of queens low there. They will trade out transfusions, but that's energy that's not used again later. And these Lings now actually going to take a chance to dive. We do see the Disruptor shot towards the queens. We will not even get the kill. The transfusion was still ticking, and the queen just healed up, so survives the Disruptor shot. Prism pushed back, and so far, Lambo just not letting anything happen. Roche speed and melee upgrade about to finish. Bane speed starting. Man, is there any stopping this Zerg player? It really feels like he's just on an absolute tear at the moment.
Yeah, Lambo is frankly just playing really well right now. It is impressive to watch, especially how he's handling, like you were saying, those disruptor drops and how they really can find bits and pieces of damage. Usually they find at least a little. It feels like they have found almost nothing. They have found absolutely nothing. Oh, that shade was not supposed to finish up there for Harstem. Ends up having a recall, loses a couple of Adepts, which kind of sucks, but the Adepts are going to become less and less important as this game goes on at this point. Now it's all about reinforcing with Stalkers. My kind of fear right now, Wardy, is that Lambo is getting up into that groove point where he's got all of his Banelings finishing up. He's got his Baneling speed close to finishing. He's flooding out the last couple of units here as he knocks down those last set of rocks. And Harstem's ground army is not looking that scary just yet. He's got a couple of the Immortals. He's got High Templars and he's got Storm and everything. But I think he's just barely missing a little bit of that final bit of beef he needs for his army.
Yeah, I do think the Storm is much better this game than it was in the last because just obviously, you know, kind of talked about the idea, the concept of, as he gets a few kills, the concept of it just being a bit more Ling Bane focused than Roach Ravager should give the Storm more potential. Let's see, Lambo will have the option to pincer into this position if he wants to. That's one of the things about this map, that you can kind of come from the two sides. So we'll see if he takes opportunity of that. And did have a few Adepts still set up on that bottom left watchtower for the counter-attack as well, as we do see already trying to come in from all angles. First couple of Storms are pretty good. Oh, we didn't get all the damage done we needed on the Banelings. We do morph the Archon to protect. The far right side was going very well for Harstem, but I'm worried now that these Lings getting in with no splash damage are going to absolutely shred, because there's also just not Zealots and there's no charge. So building Zealots feels very bad. We're going to lose both the Disruptors as well. This wasn't the prettiest of fights for Lambo, but there were definitely good parts to it, especially losing 19 pros to Harstem is going to be rough.
Yeah, the Adepts coming in from the backside is a very unanticipated kind of trade over there. Lambo ends up trading out in a very interesting way, though, because a lot of the damage he did was just the worker kills, but you know, Harstem did end up losing a lot of the High Templar, like you were pointing out as well. But it's kind of interesting because a handful of the Immortals still stayed alive. There's still more High Templars that are quickly warped in during the midst of the attack that are building up more energy. I do wonder if Harstem's actually okay-ish with how those trades went. Well, not so much when the Lings get the run by into the natural in the main.
I actually think the trades are probably fine. Like, losing the splash damage sucks, but it's rebuildable. This sort of damage is just 23 workers and warp-ins everywhere else apart from like where it needs to be. A couple of High Templar don't have energy right now. There's probes in the corner absolutely stacked. They're going to get absolutely destroyed. Come on, kill them. Do something. Okay, we're kind of getting there. We do have some High Templar with energy. Storming on roaches. Definitely going to soften them up. Nice ideas. And the right call really just... I mean, Lambo is just taking complete control of this game. The natural expansion is about to die. That's the sort of position we're in. These run-bys are just not being handled at all. Pylons are dropping everywhere, and I mean, yeah, Lambo just comes in with another round of units. Super Battery is going to be forced here. Ling's kind of just jumping on things everywhere. And it's a very chaotic affair, but Lambo's just going to keep on remaxing with more and more, and he is just storming through this entire best of 5 Gear Dragon.
He did phenomenal in this series so far, and while it's not technically over just yet, he is now leading up still about 40 supply and army. And he's also got the killer economy behind it to make things work. This is Harstem's kind of last hurrah. He's got to make something happen. I mean, those are great storms. He is taking some great trades over here, but I think he's got that one last storm left over. And yeah, there it is. That's the final storm. Has to morph in an Archon, and he literally has to win the game off of this army right here.
Yeah, which, you know, I mean, I've seen worse armies have to win games, but Lambo just has so many units, and the moment these Archons go down, the biggest weakness is again going to be the Zerglings that can build. There's 42 of them on the way right now. There's just nothing good against Lings. There's a couple of Adepts here, and sure they've got Glaze. It's just not enough at this stage. Harstem knows it. GG, and Lambo sweeps this series.